Welcome back to Trending Education. Dan Strafford, Mike Palmer along with you. And on today's episode, we're going to talk again about edutainment and why it's not that bad. Even it is a good word to talk about in the educational sphere. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing well, and I'm happy to see the renaissance of the word edutainment, which I've been a fan of edutainment for a long time. It's also like I view edutainment as like a way of consuming content. It's almost like, if we're hunting and gathering our experiences in life, the prey that I'm always seeking is edutainment. Like I want to learn and I want to be entertained while I'm learning. So I do think it's interesting that that whole concept has maybe not, that word at least has had some negative connotations as not being serious enough, academic enough. But I think it's an interesting topic because I think there's plenty of opportunities to learn in ways that are entertaining. And I think part of what we wanted to do on this show too is just recommend a few of them because that gives us an excuse to talk about like media and pop culture. But again, that's the mindset part, right? I think if you watch something exclusively to be entertained and like intentionally avoid, I'm almost learning right now, let me stop. You're going to hear some interesting thoughts on this show because I think I at least feel the opposite to be the case where like, why not learn? And then now that we're entering an age of like second screening and you can always be, it's figuring out the right questions to ask, like, what is this provoking you to think about? And then how can you find the best information about those ideas? I think it's a really interesting topic. Plus, we get to talk about language and portmanteaus. So, like, this is like a win-win-win. This is what I like to call a win-win-win.
So many different. I think there's a good hip hop song we can put underneath here.
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah.
So there are many paths to go down here. One, I want to let everyone know the week upcoming as we drop this Thursday and Friday. There is a conference going on in Cambridge, Massachusetts called Sound Education. Mike will be appearing on a panel there talking about social sciences, but it's a great place to talk about podcasts. It's called Sound Education. It is a great place to talk about podcasts, but about learning in general and about entertaining. Obviously, what we're trying to do here is not only bring knowledge and learning to the forefront, but be entertaining while doing it. So you keep tuning in. But this is a good place to get in on that. So if you're interested, check out Sound Education. Mike will be there. I'll be there. Don't know if we're going to record anything for the pod ourselves there as of yet, but we're going to try to. So if you're out there, love for you to say hi.
And also, it's great point, Dan, too. And also, I think we can hopefully start curating other podcasts that you can learn from as well, because I think there's a growing set of them. And this conference in particular is where folks have been focused on learning and educational audio, educational podcasting are all going to be getting together. Excited to see who we connect with, whether we record with them immediately or later on. But one fun part about podcasting as a format is it's very collaborative. It's pretty easy to get somebody on. So hopefully we'll be able to make some new connections and bring some additional experts in, because like it is, as I've looked more into the educational podcasting space, the concept of edutainment is pretty prevalent, and it's generally not viewed negatively as a word, and also as an approach to your style, I guess.
Yep.
And I think the format of podcasts almost lend themselves to like entertaining conversation, at least when they're at their best. So like if you have a conversational format and you're focused on learning, it's been fun discovering that there's many different flavors of this out there. We tend to be almost intentionally very wide-ranging in our topics. But it's interesting to see, although they all relate to learning, it is interesting to see when folks go deep on a particular thing. So like, interesting about that. I haven't seen anyone go deep specifically on edutainment yet. But who knows?
Who knows what's next? I want to sort of set up our conversation from here. You have many times talked about edutainment, but also the other side, which you have deemed at times entercation, which is the idea of edutainment being education that is entertaining. on the other side, entertainment that is educational, right? So the idea, do you think we need to define them as two separate things, or do you think whether you learn or not matters?
I like that you're trying to be honest in your take there about the difference between edutainment and entercation. Nobody talks about entercation. It's just a
They
bad.
will now,
It's
Mike.
just a bad portmanteau. Like when you have a bad portmanteau, it doesn't get legs. Nobody wants to. It's sad, it goes to the shelter for bad portmanteaus, and
The farm
nobody.
upstate.
There's a bunch of terms on Urban Dictionary with 0 likes. Like it's just a sad state of affairs. I like to joke about entercation because edutainment is so much more prevalent as a word. If you get zeitgeisty about it, you go to Google, you do your little search, you're going to find tons of terms, tons of references to edutainment, not so many for entercation. Talk a little bit more about it later, but I also started to dig in a little bit around flern, learning, put the fun in the learning and you get flern. But I think they're all interesting ways of thinking about connecting learning to the rest of your life, and also connecting learning, which is typically thought of as a cognitive behavior, to an emotional experience. And I think when a great teacher does that, I think frequently it is in an entertaining way. I think it could be. There are ways in which the experience can be memorable, salient, powerful. Sometimes it's very personal, vulnerable, authentic, showing extra care and nurturing. I wouldn't necessarily call that edutainment. I would call that caring, great teaching. But I think the edutainment part is more where humor or narrative or just sort of like the tenets of storytelling come into play in the classroom or in any sort of teacher-student dynamic, and I think that's where the magic happens, as far as I'm concerned. Those are the. I still remember experiences from high school. I was lucky enough to have good public school really throughout my initial education in the U.S. But I remember many of my teachers, particularly teaching me language. I remember Drew Wineland, my English teacher, I think 10th grade. He modeled for me a love of language, and the way the turn of phrase. I think he was trying to be a poet, and he had some writing. He was just a very funny guy, super sharp. Edited our yearbook. But he was a guy, when he would just stand at the lecture, there was a lectern, and talk about vocabulary. There was no format like podcasting available then, but I listened to those lectures in the way that I listen to great podcasts nowadays. And I think we're still just scratching the surface of getting those amazing, intimate, small experiences that happen in literally millions of classrooms across the world. Get those memorialized in formats that everybody can enjoy. It's a pretty interesting state and time, and then related to that, I think, is also what we frequently call the golden age of media and entertainment that we're living in, where outside of capturing what's in a small classroom somewhere and give it the platform and scale of reaching the world through podcasting or YouTubing or these formats. I think on the other side is, people who traditionally haven't been associated with learning and education wanting to add value, wanting to give back, and then providing entertaining content that is still elevating to the audience. We're seeing a ton of that. And I think we have some references of more highly produced video shows, either shows on HBO or Netflix. I did want to make sure we talked a little bit about some of those, because I do think if you adopt that mindset of, when I'm consuming media, it's partly with the intent to learn. That's really the mindset that I have. I read and listen to a ton of nonfiction.
Yep.
A lot of the podcasts that I listen to are, I would view, at least informative in part. And I think we want to begin to curate a little bit of that also as part of this conversation. But I don't know. Did I answer your question, Dan?
You did. I think it's the wide, array of what can be edutaining, like what can be in this pocket is a teacher who takes it upon themselves to be entertaining in the classroom. It's also purpose-built edutainment, things on Netflix, things on podcasts that are built to be exactly in this sphere. And I think being open to it all being edutainment is really where we'll do well. If it's entertaining, do you get more out of it, or do you retain it a little bit better, or do you recall it better? I had similar teacher experiences, I should say, in high school and college. Professor I had in college sang every class period and would sing he would use a pop song from his 60s, 70s to describe something in U.S. history. Right. And he wasn't good, but he made himself accessible. His first day of class, he used Getting to Know You. He sang. Yeah. And when he finished, he said, if I can sing that here in this class, you can raise your hand to ask a question.
Right.
And so those are sort of things that stuck with me.
He was wearing his pants, right? Because if he wasn't, well, it was a while ago, so maybe who knows? Who knows?
He was pantsed. Yes.
Okay.
He had pants.
Because like if you really want to be like, if I can embarrass let me show you how embarrassing I can get. It can start to get awkward.
Right. Exactly right. And he was just his singing voice was the level of embarrassment he went for in that regard. But I think. One, there is a global report out, which is great to see, on the global edutainment market analysis and forecast to 2027. So that's not something we're going to dive into fully here because it's a lot of data, but the research is being done around this as well. So talking about edutainment as a word and as even an industry, it's being recognized as such. So we're getting to see that people are producing content, ed tech companies, Netflix, all those people in the world. I wanted to take a step back and define a little edutainment for myself. Yeah. And it's coming back is Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? Mm-hmm. Is one of those shows that growing up I loved. And it was geography, it was computers, it was logic games to an extent of understanding where she might be going and how you needed to find her. And it's back now on Netflix. It's a cartoon, and it's going to be apparently a live action film via Netflix as well. And there's potential for the live show to be coming back as well in the not too distant future. Mm-hmm. And that to me is what sticks out as capital E edutainment, or sort of what I think of when I think of edutainment. The ability to entertain kids, entertain them in this sort of spy world, but also that's how I learned a lot of geography. That's how I learned a lot of where places were in the world and how cultures worked. And that's what I think first and foremost when it comes to edutainment. Is that similar to what you think of when you think of edutainment, or do you think of something differently when this world and this genre comes up?
Yeah, well, and full disclosure, I think we talked about it on the show before. Yep. Like we almost named this show That's Edutainment. And we did a show specifically about edutainment where I sang That's Edutainment to the tune of That's Entertainment.
Yes.
The musical from like way back in the day. So this is something very close to my heart. I think probably with good reason we named this show Trending in Education. Who knows? 190 shows later, we're not sure, but we've had a great run with Trending in Education. We'll likely continue to do it, but it's kind of fun that under that name. But it's fun to understand that we were calling this Trending in Education was originally called That's Edutainment. If you find our back catalog, you may hear me sing.
Oh, we'll find it.
That tune, and that is something that when people sing, you remember it. When people tell you a joke, you frequently remember it. Jokes are stories, and you remember jokes more than you remember just like sort of boring stories that people tell you. So the humor makes it entertaining, makes it salient. That's easier to remember. I think the return of this more broad concept, I think, is tied to the profusion of content that's available, where people can slice and filter in a very refined way now, so you can find exactly what you need. So you can get some, artisanal e-learning, small batch artisanal e-learning can be delivered to you. And I think that's different than like way back in the day when I think a lot of this started was more like the Children's Television Network, Sesame Street, the Electric Company, PBS just in general. And then, there were laws in there was a movement to fund public education and leverage television as a way to broadcast television as a way to,
absolutely,
continue to push out content that was specifically designed to educate kids. Not too dissimilar from, there was a panic not too dissimilar from what people are talking about now around social media. Panic may be slightly overstated, but it's salient, it's emotional, roll with me. But I think there was a concern that there wasn't enough like valuable content. TV was all low values. Our kids aren't learning from TV. They're just sitting in front of the quote unquote idiot box, watching cartoons that don't really educate. And that wound up with a lot of the original programming that was designed by a handful of production companies that was designed to educate. So that's like Sesame Street, the Electric Company, and later on the Muppets, which I would think is probably a little more entertainment rather than they weren't specifically designed for education, but that was all, the Jim Henson sort of school was really interesting. And then Electric Company was another one run out of Boston. Morgan Freeman worked there. A bunch of big stars got their start there. And they did really compelling content as well in the early 70s. And that was also right around the time that Schoolhouse Rock was also on broadcast television. So I think edutainment became associated with television early. And I think a lot of that television was either specifically designed as educational programming on the public broadcast networks, or it was designed as sort of like Saturday morning interstitials. So like when you were eating your sugary cereal and watching too many cartoons, during the commercial breaks, there would be like some stealth learning where a cartoon would start and it would have a jingle and you'd be like, hey, this is pretty cool. And then lo and behold, you would memorize the preamble to the Constitution, which I still remember to this day. And I've begun to sing it to my son because he's 9 months old. He doesn't know what I'm talking about. But at least I'm sort of communicating something that has meaning to me, and it's even historical content. And all of that comes from kind of that sweet spot of my upbringing in the, say, like mid to late 70s into the 80s, when there was kind of a golden age then, I think, as well, when like a lot of the initial visionaries around educational television and educational broadcasting designed for kids were really in like their auteur phase. Then I think it became a little more like mapping a similar design intent like Carmen Sandiego around like maybe the next phase of public broadcasting production. Like they had a different orientation towards, that's like 3-2-1 Contact and like Carmen Sandiego. That was sort of like the next phase. But like this type of content has continued to get out there. But I think once cable came, it fractured a little more. And I don't know whether it's come back together for kids. And then I think the other reason why it's a bit of a dirty word for adults, or just a bad word, excuse me, is that, it's seen as somewhat trivial. Like if something you could learn through a short form video or, audio edutainment is an interesting idea. But if you learn something through something you listen to that is designed first for entertainment purposes, it's like, well, why aren't you doing the hard work? Why aren't you eating your vegetables? Why aren't you going through the drier material? Why do you have to go to the funny lecturer? Why can't you go to the person who really knows her stuff? Those are really interesting questions. And that's something I think we want to, see what kind of research there is in the space. Frankly, it's kind of exciting to see that there is research in this space and that there seems to be more focus on this type of content. And then I think that's partly because I think it is picking up viewership, listenership, interest. And maybe we could pick up with a few of our recommendations, Dan. So I don't know if you had any recent shows or any programming you've enjoyed of late that has both entertained and illuminated you?
You recommended the one I was going to bring up, which is Backstory as a podcast.
Yes.
We had it recommended through a couple of different channels to Mike, and Mike passed it along to me. It's one I've just started listening to, so I haven't gotten too deep into it. But the idea behind it, I love, of historians breaking down the backstory to an event or to something happening in the world. I guess I still am a history major from college, though I do not practice in said major regularly. I do like understanding it. So that's one that I look forward to digging into more. And I will say, I've talked about it in the past, PINA, which is an organization we've talked about before here, and we hope to talk to them very soon here on the podcast. I've gotten that for my daughters. We've used it and used that platform.
And can you explain a little what PINA is?
So PINA is focused on bringing audio to young children and getting them to be off screens. Now, understanding they need entertainment or want entertainment, but going to the podcast side, going to the audio side to be entertaining and educational. The main one we listened to was the Mars Patel serial show, and we're not the whole way through it, but it's about space travel and it's about a little bit of mystical stuff and science fiction, but it's really entertaining. It's really well written. Kept me riveted while we were driving. We listened to it in the car, and isn't a very interesting platform to get away from screens, but still use modern technology, modern things to entertain school-age children.
Yeah, and good audio production, music, original programming designed to help. I think it's targeting children age 3 to 12, and it's audio-based, subscription service, and it's an interesting one to track in this space. And it is a little bit of the spoonful of sugar mode of content strategy, where mostly entertaining, but also frequently the topics are also educational in nature, or there are ways for families to kind of talk about the ideas in ways that are helpful. And to your point, I think the real biggest win there is that it sort of frees your kids from screens.
They have another show we're really interested in, which we haven't listened to yet, which is all about debating, but it's debating topics like ice cream versus dragons.
Right.
And like things that are entertaining in so much that it's fanciful and it's freeing of the mind, but it's also teaching children how to debate and how to discuss topics and support a topic sentence and support their ideas with facts and argument behind it, which is really interesting. My kids don't need the argument side of it, that is for sure. But we will entertain that one soon as well.
I'm still struggling. I don't know I would need more time to do research to even cast a vote one way or another. That's tough, because like you got ice cream, but then you got dragons, and I'm a grown man and I can't even answer that question. So, I probably would lose to like a 7-year-old in that debate. But yeah, that's interesting stuff. And so those are great recommendations on the audio side. I watched The Mind Explained, or I started to watch that, which Vox, we've talked about Vox explainers recently on these shows. So Vox does a nice job with their video explainers. They just did a series about the mind, narrated by Emma Stone. And that's pretty compelling content, also relatively short form. So you could, I think one's on anxiety, one's on dreaming. I haven't gotten to the one on psychedelics, but I'll get to that one. It's an interesting, I think it's like 5 or 6 shows. They're all about the mind. And, Netflix will push you into binge mode on that before you know it too. So I'm still trying to tweak my settings on Netflix and YouTube so that I can actually do spaced repetition and I actually have time to kind of wrestle with the content, try to recall it on my own before I'm sort of dropped right into the next one and the next one and the next one. But those were quite good. I would recommend the ones that I saw, at least. And I imagine they're all like that. And another great show that I would recommend that I watched recently, it also got a good amount of press, was called American Factory, which is on Netflix, which covers the story of a factory in Ohio that manufactures the windshields and glass for cars. and how the American factory, American owned and operated factory had gone under, and now a Chinese company had come in to the middle of Ohio to kind of revive the town by opening up a plant here. But then some of the dynamics that emerged there, whether the workers there could unionize, how does this relate to our U.S. Chinese relationships, the current dynamics around our trade with China, and all communicated in a very human kind of documentary lens. I thought was really compelling in a number of ways, and it also gives you something to kind of grab hold of, where sometimes these ideas get abstract, and this was sort of told in a very case study kind of narrative. So I thought that was great. We mentioned backstory, which I think is another one, and then just shameless plug for Succession, which is my new Sunday night HBO go-to, and it's about. It is somewhat educational. It's a bit of a stretch, but it's based in part on some of the bigger media families, whether it's the Murdochs or the Redstones or some kind of blend of the two. And it's basically about a family-owned media company that is about to go through, a succession planning phase around Brian Cox, who plays Logan, the patriarch of the family, and the dynamics among his family, his new wife, and really intriguing, really funny, and then does, for those of us who have any sort of interest in how large organizations are run, how media companies operate. Obviously, it's dramatized, but and brilliantly acted, and obviously adult themes. It's not TV, it's HBO, but I got a lot out of that. And also, it's vaguely tied to the story of Lear. So like you do have the aging patriarch who has to divide up his country in the case of his kingdom in the case of Lear, and his company in the case of Succession. But it's also getting not quite there, but a little bit close to this just in appointment viewing element of what I loved about Game of Thrones is that, like, as each new episode is released, I think there's only 2 left in this season, there's a lot of content generated around the show, and I am looking for replacements to that Game of Thrones fancy that I established over the years. So maybe it's a little more just pure entertainment, but I think you can think about what you might learn. And it is also, we talked about how, I think when we were trying to do the same thing with Game of Thrones, how you learn about what it's like to be Machiavellian. Like I think Succession does a lot of that, where like what are the right tactics to kind of acquire power and influence. It's got a little bit of a reality TV Survivor kind of alliance thing going on too. And I think we're naturally drawn to those types of stories about power and intrigue. And then also it's just brilliantly written. So I think, if you love language, it's just a writerly show.
You going this direction, though, also allows me to drop that apparently the last episode of Ballers, which is the Rock Dwayne Johnson show, was called Edutainment. Well, the last episode was, in fact, called Edutainment. As far as I can tell, while researching for this episode, the one that aired this past weekend was called Edutainment. So we'll have to check that out. I will drop one more. I talked about this on the Gartner Hype Cycle episode, the Wired 5 levels videos. There are 6 of them over there on YouTube. There's quantum physics, quantum computing. There's one about music as well. So it's an expert explaining things at 5 different levels: elementary school, high school, college, an early stage professional, and then an expert. And so you see how they change the explanation to get up to that expert, but you learn along the way because you're getting that foundational piece, which is the elementary school level, and then you build on it pretty quickly. And it's intriguing. I like the way they built it, and I think it's actually a really cool model to think about when teaching foundational and then building and scaffolding and all that very quickly, though, obviously, in that video series. Any final thoughts on clearly a very large topic that we're going to come back to. We are, as I said, at Sound Education this Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That is a series that just began last year, a conference that began last year that is looking to expand and grow and bring people in and bring people together. And Mike put it, it's very easy to be competitive when you have a show and you have other education shows. This is a very open world, and one that's open to partnerships and networking and people getting together and working together and growing together. So the education podcast space and the education and even edutainment space is pretty wide open. So if you're interested, this is a good place to enter. But any final thoughts for you, Mike?
Not really. I like the idea of Learn, which when I saw it on Urban Dictionary, it looks like learning through failure has 3 votes and is the only definition of Learn on Urban Dictionary. So
we got 2 votes right here. So
yeah, exactly. So maybe we can start a groundswell. I don't get me wrong. I love the whole concept of learning through failure. That's the Nelson Mandela quote that I use frequently, which is I never lose. I either win or learn. Is famously attributed to Nelson Mandela, which I believe in that level of learn. But I also think the idea of fun while you learn is really intriguing to me. And jokingly, of course, because you can't take something called Learn that seriously. But yeah, it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to see what comes out of this conference. Would love to hear more from folks for their recommendations. Where do you go to learn? We'll continue to try to make those recommendations both on shows and through other outlets. But yeah, it is a fun time to be learning. So don't be shy about getting your Learn on.
And there it is. That's where we'll leave this one. If you have recommendations, you find us on Twitter at TrendingInEd, same on Facebook and on LinkedIn. Find us linkedin.com/trendingineducation. We're posting there, sharing there each and every week. So join us if you're on LinkedIn yourself. trendingineducation.com as well for any and all information about our show. Thanks so much for listening, as always, to Trending in Education.